Welcome today to something quite exciting for Jungle IT. It's our first ever video podcast. We've never done one of these before, so don't hold it against us if we mess anything up. But we've got a couple of very special guests here joining me today. So to do introductions, first of all, I'm Thomas Barker. I'm a client relationship manager at Jungle IT and have been with the business for 8 years now, working with a selection of our key clients. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined today by two very special guests. So to start with, David Blythe.
Hi, David Blythe, Head of Cloud Architecture. Been at Jungle for 6 years, helping clients sort of navigate the world of Azure.
Thank you, David. And then also, please say, Nigel Stott's joined us from Switalskis.
Thanks, Tom. I'm Nigel. I'm CTO at Switalskis. I've been there for just under 3.5 years now. So responsibility for the whole technology stack and, taking Switalskis on our journey through the ever-evolving world of technology.
Yeah, it's certainly ever-changing, isn't
Absolutely.
it? But so I guess what we're hoping to sort of get from today's podcast is we're going to be looking at sort of certain technologies like Microsoft Azure and AVD, but also digging into the sort of deeper challenges. And it's obviously we're looking at, a law firm in Nigel's case and the challenges he's got, but a lot of that is not uncommon to other types of businesses as well. But we're going to cover off sort of the wider ever-changing IT industry as well and how Nigel's role is ever evolving as well. So hopefully should be a lot to sort of get our teeth into today on the podcast. So I guess first of all, Nigel, starting with yourself. So you have been looking at moving to Microsoft Azure, but can we start with sort of, I guess, where you guys were as a firm with your tech stack and I guess the challenges that you were coming across that led to you looking at it?
Absolutely. So right now we have all our hardware in a data center based in Leeds. And that's done Switalskis fine for a number of years. But one of the things that we are looking towards as a firm is growth. And with growth comes challenges. One of those challenges is scalability. So one of the things that we were consistently coming across with the existing technology stack is delays in our ability to expand that infrastructure out. So, for example, if we had acquired a firm and need to onboard a number of users, we would have to increase the hardware resources we had available. But what that usually means is a whole process you've got to go through. You've got to go out and get a quote, the equipment you need. You've got to wait for that kit to be delivered. Sometimes it might get delivered to the wrong place, so you've got to wait for that to be delivered to the right place. And then it's going to be configured, it's going to be tested, it's going to be set up. You might come across issues. So even for the most straightforward of upgrades, it could sometimes take 6 to 8 weeks to get that done. So if we're looking to grow quickly, that isn't really a situation that was sustainable for us. That's why we started looking more towards cloud technologies.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of we were both at a sort of a legal IT conference, weren't we?
Yes.
And I know one of the key things that stood out for me was where one of the speakers said you can't look at IT as a cost center anymore. It's a growth engine for your business, and absolutely. IT needs to be framed differently now. And I guess what you're saying there is that with the Azure piece, there was a bigger picture really of where Switalskis was wanting to go as a firm, and you were needing to tie the IT strategy in on the back of those growth plans.
Yeah, we've got to be able to respond to change. So I think off the back of the growth plans, we knew that there could be situations where we need to scale the environment out fairly quickly.
Yes.
So being able to do that at the touch of a button rather than that convoluted process I spoke about just now, that was critical for us. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that existing environment requires a lot of maintenance. We've got a good team in the IT department at Switalskis, very competent technical people who can maintain that environment. But ultimately, that means that a lot of their time is spent in the data center configuring the systems. And what we really need to do is kind of extract them from that and get them out into the business, providing visible value to the rest of the firm.
Yeah, because I think there's constantly an ever-evolving thing, isn't there, with ultimately your users are your customers at Switalskis, aren't they? And it's that positive perception of an IT department within a firm that you're adding value to them and making their day-to-day roles better and making them more productive, I guess, and freeing up your team to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The world of technology as we see it at the moment, we all know that it's evolving at such a rapid pace. I could talk at length about AI and
Oh, yeah.
all that great stuff. But what we need to do is we need to be out there. We need to be speaking to people. We need to understand where the inefficiencies are in the business. We need to understand where technology can provide value. And the only way to do that is to get out onto the floors, get out into the various offices and speak to people. So having that time to do that, to understand what's going on, to be able to identify where technology can provide that value is really important, not just to us, but to the business as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess sort of taking it back then, so you've sort of identified we have a problem, we want to free up some of our IT resources, we need to do something with our infrastructure. What options did you look at? I'm guessing you didn't just look at Microsoft Azure. What was the, can you take us back to your thought process really at the start of your review?
Yeah, so I guess we had in mind that Azure might be the solution ultimately we wanted to head for, but what we had to consider is, what were the risks with Azure as well? Because, some people might say that, well, if you move all your infrastructure into Azure, are you putting all your eggs into one basket? Are there certain risks that come along with that? So we considered a number of different scenarios. One of those scenarios, for example, was a hybrid scenario. Is there a situation where we might put some of our systems into Azure but keep some in the data center? But for various reasons, we ultimately decided that, in terms of going back to being agile, but also identifying ways of mitigating some of the risks around Azure. So I think whilst we will have our production systems in Azure, they will be replicated over to the Azure Site Recovery Platform. We do have third-party backup solutions in place. So if the worst happens and, if Microsoft were ever to go down completely, at least we've got ways of recovering our data.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so you obviously did your review. How did you manage the sort of, I guess, key stakeholders in the business? Because I know you and I have had the conversation before around these things aren't just an IT project. It's not just an IT decision. So what was involved from your side with regards to letting the business know what the options were and I guess bringing them with you on the journey?
Yeah, so I think the important part is to start surfacing these problems in everyday conversations that you're having across the business. One of the things that is really important in situations like this is to, avoid the technical jargon and just really lay it down and put it into everyday terms that the business gets, but also positioning this as problems that are identifiable to them. So, the business obviously is going on this journey. Everybody wants to make sure that journey is smooth as possible. But by highlighting some of the potential problems and pain points that we could face had we stayed with the infrastructure stack we have at the moment, we can start to, lead the conversation around the benefits of Azure and why we do that. It's a conversation that we need to bring up as much as possible when we're having discussions with various departments across the business. Essentially, what I did is created a business case that identified where we were now, where we needed to be, and what the journey would look like.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is really interesting around identifying the problems, first of all, because I know with AI, for example, and some people are sick of hearing about AI now, aren't they? And often people are, the answer's AI, let me go and find a problem that it can solve. And it's like, well, no, look for the problem it can solve, look for the problem first. And if AI is the answer, great. If automation's the answer, great. But it's you've kind of started with we know we have an issue here that we need to address, which is why I've gone and looked and picked Azure ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely right. I think one of the things as well is that, we were obviously very conscious of the potential costs around Azure.
Oh, yeah.
But when you lay it out side by side, if we look at the existing infrastructure environment in the data center, and we take into account things like data center hosting costs, we take into account power consumption costs, and you look at all your licensing, you look at the cost of replacing hardware, you look at the cost of the support and warranties around that. When we did the calculations, putting it together side by side, then in actual fact, Azure was coming out slightly less than what it would have cost to run the existing environment for another 4 years. So it also made sense on that basis.
Yeah, and it's not, and I guess it's not always a cost thing, is it? But that certainly helps with the decision making process, doesn't it? If you can save money, then that's great.
Just factor into it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And I guess David, bringing sort of you into the conversation. So obviously you were involved in a lot of those discussions with Nigel, weren't you? But I guess taking it now from the process of, okay, Nigel and Switalskis have decided that Azure may be the way forward for them. What does the start of the process look like from a point of view of somebody looking at moving to Azure? How do you run the process?
It always has to start with an assessment. So looking at what the current infrastructure is doing, not just throwing things into Azure, just analysing correctly. So that's a paid for service by Microsoft that we can offer to clients, which we did with the team at Switalskis. Once that report has been generated, we then go into an Azure workshop. So where we sit down with the business, it doesn't just have to be IT. It can be anybody in the business that's got an interest in that in that area. So finance, MDs, anybody can attend these workshops with us. We look at the cloud adoption framework and we go over things like the well-architected review to fully understand the methodologies and the sort of best practices of migrating into public cloud, in this case Azure.
And just to sorry to interrupt, David, but just to give a bit of background for people that may not know, then the sort of, we mentioned the cloud adoption framework. It's something that gets thrown around a lot in the jungle office, isn't it? A CAF. Yeah. But can you just give us a little bit more information on that and why it matters?
Yeah, it's to understand the business needs. So Microsoft Azure is just the products. It's just the infrastructure as a service, really. But it's to understand all the kind of methodologies, the security, the best practices, cost management. Why are we moving into Azure? What does that give us? So it's not the technical aspects. It's just the whole piece around it. But then that also then links into things like sort of enterprise landing zones, how we deliver that kind of foundational piece once we do start then moving into Azure, and just so the whole business, and again, so it can feed into Nigel's business case to the rest of the organization that are not technical, what Azure means, what is public cloud effectively. Effectively, it's bits of tin that Microsoft own, not Switalskis. So we cover all of that in the workshop. What we also do then is we look at the infrastructure. So we look at all of the workloads. We go, and really kind of deep dive into what these VMs are doing. So these virtual machines. We have a habit, and I'm equally guilty of this, is if we've got some tin, we just build VMs for fun because we can, and that's happened. And Ed, who's the technical lead at Switalskis, will admit that. So we break that down because we're now paying for every part of the compute. Yeah. So we need to really streamline that solution. So at the end of the workshop, we know exactly how a migration would take place. We know how that will be built and structured from the ground up. We understand all of the benefits and kind of pitfalls as well that might come with Azure, so that the business has a good understanding and can make an informed decision for moving in that. And at the end of that, also we give the price. So that's very important to customers. Like Nigel said, when they'd done the comparison, it was actually cheaper, and that's due to streamlining services and making sure that we have kind of cost management and the right solution in place for the organisation.
Yeah, and I guess I know when we've done our legal leaders meals before, people have had pricing from a number of providers on Azure who've all come back with wildly different pricing, and that can obviously lead to misconceptions. Then, can't it? That isn't Azure? Isn't it really expensive? And how do I control the costs?
And it can be, and that's why the assessment's really important at the start, and then that workshop piece to then really truly understand. If you just did a complete lift and shift, then potentially it would be more expensive. I can't quite remember the numbers, but I think we shaved something in the region of 20 servers potentially from the Switalski estate as we're migrating it up. So if we'd have had those in, then the numbers wouldn't stack up. It's all around cost management, optimization, looking at performance of what's going to be put into Azure, and then utilizing things like reserved instances and savings plans to make potentially up to 60% savings across the stack as well. And then maybe modernizing some areas. So again, not in Switalski's case, but other clients, we've migrated sort of file servers into either Azure Files or into sort of Teams and SharePoint to leverage those kind of 365 services as well.
Yeah, and I think just to pick up on your reserved instance point, I quite like the approach that we use and other companies will use towards that, where we don't start with, well, I guess first of all, can you give us some background on what is a reserved instance for those that don't know, but then our approach to how and when we would apply them?
Yeah, so if you build a server in Azure, for example, it goes on a pay-as-you-go model to start with. So that's every hour of the month you get charged three elements. So it's compute, so that's the CPU and memory, the license attached to that, depending on what operating system. You can add extra savings by bringing kind of hybrid use rights into play as well. And then the storage, so the operating system disk and any additional storage is kind of perpetual. So that's charged on a per hour basis. What we do at Jungle when we do a migration or any kind of Azure build is that we assess that for a month. So that then allows us to see if we've got the right CPU and memory allocation, if we've got the right IOPS in the disks, because there's several types of disks that we can build in Azure, and making sure that we've got that skew, as we call it, correct. Because we don't want to over-provision, but equally we don't want to under-provision. Once we're happy with that, we can then purchase reserved instances, either 1 or 3 years. And what you're showing there is a commitment to Microsoft on that particular VM size. Then that offers savings of, like I said, up to 60% if we do a 3-year commitment on it. It's not as scary as it sounds because it's not tied to the virtual machine. We can then move it around the Azure estate. We can build other machines. We can upgrade if we need to, or we can move it to different types of compute as well. So it's a really good way of saving, like I said, quite a bit of money.
But it's getting the solution right first
right,
before making sure we apply the savings.
You don't want to lock in on a reserved instance on something that's massively overspec'd and not going to be utilised. So that's why we do that. For months. And then we equally review those all the time as well. So with our managed Azure service, we can analyze VMs constantly. And if we spot that there's a particular, a saving or as a performance problem, we can then adapt that as well.
Brilliant. And then I guess another key point of the workshop, and again, sort of, going back to legal as an example, Nigel, we're looking at like what applications are the users using? How will that play in as your virtual desktop? Because one of, again, I guess common misconceptions we get is certain firms may think, well, what we're using is really special and nobody else uses that in the whole world. And we sort of say, well, actually, we've got other clients working with that. Here's how it works. But we address all of that, don't we, in the workshop as well?
So what we traditionally find is practice management systems.
Yeah,
I've got a really, they need that low latency to work really effectively. So things like the Azure Virtual Desktop are really good for that. It gives you that secure boundary for your applications. So you might be using Intune and kind of policies to secure your device endpoint, but adding AVD to that gives that extra layer of security that all of your infrastructure's in one place. But equally, it then gives you that high performance metric on it. We did an AVD migration for another law firm a few years ago, and they actually saw a massive improvement in performance for staff. So they weren't having to go home to do extra work because there wasn't enough hours in the day because of the improvements in performance that we were able to achieve with it. They had a lot happier workforce. And I've not seen a practice management system that hasn't worked with AVD. Plus, we also do proof of concept. So the next stage after the workshop is to build up, do what we call our CAF service. So get that Azure infrastructure secure from the ground up, making sure all the foundations are there, all the Azure policies. And then we do a proof of concept. So we spin up the practice management system in a siloed environment and build a small AVD estate for the IT to test, and then out to UAT as well. Fully capable.
And I guess your point there that, and I know which firm you're talking about, but with regards to the users having a better experience, I think sometimes Azure can get looked at as, well, it's just infrastructure and it's boring, it's in the background, nobody knows what it's doing. Nigel, you care about it. David, you love it. But as a user, why should I care? But that is a reason why you should care if you're struggling currently and having to work on an evening because your systems are a bit slow. As a user at your firm, if it runs faster for me, I don't have to put in the same amount of hours to get my chargeable time done, because I guess that's a big consideration for you guys, isn't it? The chargeable time piece,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. One of the key responsibilities we have as a team is to make sure that the systems are reliable, that they're stable, that they are that they're running adequately. And we've got to remember, whilst we're not a 24/7 business, we do offer a level of flexibility. So, if somebody wants to go home, put the kids to bed and then jump on the systems to do some work, we need to make sure that the systems are available and running to do that. So, I would say that the stability, the resilience, the reliability of those systems so people can jump on and work when they need to is just as important.
And I guess when you're doing the business plan, and putting that across, they are key points in your business plan, are they? Because, it's all very well you saying, well, I think Azure's fabulous and we should do it for all these reasons, but I guess you're wanting to get across to the business, I'm also doing this for the users to make them more productive, give them a better user experience of our IT.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our goal ultimately, is to make the way our colleagues access and interact and use the systems as effortless and streamlined as possible. So what we're trying to do is just remove those barriers, whatever they may be. We just need to work through and just make sure that anybody who needs to access systems, ideally, can do so from anywhere at any time.
Yeah, and I guess the less friction they've got with IT in terms of being able to do their role, the better, isn't it? Really, with a lot of this. So so I guess we, if we use customer A as an example, we've done the workshop, we're happy, we've looked at all the applications, we've got everything, and then we say, right, we're going to go ahead now and migrate to Azure. What does that typically look like? I guess picking up on that sort of user group testing and the approach there, because all of this, you want good sentiment on the shop floor at the end of it, don't you? So how do we do that?
Yeah, so we do an Azure migration. So that's a kind of lift and shift. So what we'll be doing for Nigel's infrastructure is we'll be migrating those up into Azure as they are. We then build in both client instances, we'll be building an AVD environment. We normally recommend a 10% testing user base to give us a good go at it. We're obviously mindful that, again, in Nigel's case and firm A is the fee earners, so that can be really tricky to get that commitment. We've done things before where we've done lunchtime pizza testing and those bits, and again, getting key users involved in that. When we do the migration, we do a test failover, which is completely siloed, so it can't then start sending out matter invoicing to clients willy-nilly or anything like that. So it's completely isolated. So then we do testing with the IT team first, make sure all the software's installed correctly and working, and then, like we said, we roll that out to UAT group. We have testing plans that we kind of adhere to, and we try and keep that testing to a nice time frame so that it doesn't kind of stall the project. We're making sure that we test the system as thoroughly as we can, both from a connectivity, user acceptance and performance basis as well. Once we're happy with that, that can all be teared down, moved out of the way, and then get ready for live migration. We always do migration, so it's zero impact to the organisation. So that's traditionally a Friday night for our guys working over the weekend to get that migration to moved over. Getting it all ready and then kind of providing that hypercare on Monday, day one, to make sure that, so again, Nigel and his team have got that sort of support from our experts from our side on that.
One thing I was going to pick up on was and bizarrely from a set of IT people, the non-technical perspective here. So there's a line that Paul Jordan, who heads up our projects team, always uses that I really like, where we want champions, don't we, in these user groups. We want the people that are going to sing from the rooftops internally at Switalskis or wherever else, going, this is brilliant, this is the benefit. But then Paul always sort of says, actually, give us some of your noisy users as well. Give us some of your problem users in those user groups, because rather than leaving them in the background to the end, we'll involve them in the process as an approach, Nigel. And I'm sure you have no problem users at Switalskis. But I guess that's a key thing, isn't it, as well? It's great having your champions, but have some people that might not struggle to adopt the technology, but we want as part of those testing groups to get them on board.
Yeah, we need to pressure test this. So, I think as part of the testing process, we need to make sure that, first of all, we've got a wide cross-section of our colleagues involved in that testing from the outset. I guess what we're trying to do is two things. We're trying to, first of all, test the systems to make sure that, in the Azure environment, they are functioning as expected. But what we're also trying to generate is a bit of positive noise around this. Because if we can have a cross-section of users who are testing the systems, yes, we're going to come across the odd issue here and there that we need to resolve. That's just the nature of tech, and that will happen. But that's the whole idea of testing. We identify those and we get those resolved. But we also want them to go away and say, in actual fact, this looks good, and generate that positivity around it. I think the way we are moving from our current systems to Azure, the way that users access the desktop won't be too dissimilar to the way we approach at the moment. So in terms of change to the end user, I don't see it as being something massively new. Yes, there'll be a different icon, and maybe the startup screen will be a little bit different. But ultimately, what we're aiming for is people to have a consistency of experience on that Monday when we go live. Ideal scenario: people are logging in and working by 8:45, just the way they normally would.
Yeah, and I guess obviously you explain the why am I doing this at board level, but also it's explaining the why you're doing it to the staff as well, isn't it? Because David loves calling me a user at Jungle, and I'm probably one of the problem users if Jungle ever did a project. But I think as a user, if you can understand, okay, I get why Nigel or David is doing this, I get they're doing it for my benefit, I'm on board with it. So I guess it's very much that, never mind messaging at board level, it's then messaging down to the users of the why. Why should I care you're doing this, Nigel? Why is it benefiting me?
Yeah, so what we try and do at Switalskis is, we are going through a program of technology change at the moment. It's not just Azure, there's other platforms that we are changing. And one of the things that we always try and do is give a little background. So, we don't just turn around and say, oh, by the way, you'll have some new dictation software on Monday. Get on and use it. What we try and do, give them a little bit of background as to why we're making these changes. Because I think the more people understand what's driven that change and why you've taken that approach rather than just some arbitrary decision that, we're going to change X for Y, then that really helps. So, yeah, certainly bring them on that journey.
What methods do you use to do that? Is it do you go and speak to individual departments? Is it company-wide updates? How do you do that internally? And I guess it might differ from project to project, but how do you approach it?
No, personally, I think it's important to take a really tailored approach.
Yeah.
So, we have a large number of legal departments at Switalskis, and depending on the department, they may require a slightly different approach due to the type of work that they undertake. Or maybe just how they like to organise themselves as a team. So, for example, for some departments, it might just be an email communication that goes out. Depending on the technology, it might be links to a couple of training videos. But for other teams, we'll get a little bit more involved. We'll run workshop sessions. We'll jump on and do a Q&A. So it really depends. And, anybody else in this kind of position, I would always advise, look at your audience and tailor your approach to your audience.
And I guess that ties back to your point about freeing up your team from the more mundane tasks, or think lower value tasks, as it were, so that they have time to get out and understand the departments and speak to the business to, I guess, then deliver greater value, isn't it?
That's right, absolutely. And I think the more as a team we can get out, speak to people, understand the way they work, and also understand what concerns and worries them, because that will change from team to team and the different areas of the business. Then the better we can tailor that approach when we are rolling out new tech.
Yeah, 100%. And taking it back to a point that you mentioned earlier, Nigel, about that, giving you that peace of mind that if there's an issue with Azure, et cetera, David, can you just touch on, it was it ASR it was called, and now it's Azure DR? They keep changing the names at Microsoft, don't they, to keep us on our toes?
Azure Site Recovery is what Nigel's talking about. Yeah, so Azure is resilient.
Yeah.
So we can build the infrastructure in multiple zones within one of the data centers, excuse me, to offer hardware failure resiliency. But then we also tailor that with Azure Site Recovery, so we can replicate the VMs almost in real time over to a secondary data center. So in the UK we have two. So we always use UK West for that DR position. So then we also then architecture it so that we can fail over one machine if we need to, if that gets hit by ransomware, for example, or a bad patch. Or we can fail it all over. But then we also offer a full DR service testing facility where we spin the entire environment up, again, siloed, so it's not going to affect production, just to make sure it works, because it's pointless having DR if you don't test it. We then also tailor that with a third-party backup solution, which isn't in Azure, which I really like, because as much as I love Azure, it can go wrong. If it does go wrong, we want to be able to have that belt and braces approach for it. So we just don't throw it in Azure and forget about it. We make sure it's protected.
And I guess taking it back to the start of the process, again, I'm conscious I'm bouncing around here. We've completed an Azure migration and now we're going back to the start of the process. But obviously one thing at Jungle we love to bang on about is our Microsoft accreditations. We are very proud of them, and they haven't been easy to achieve, have they? And so, but I always say from a client's perspective, okay, David, it's wonderful you've got all these badges as Jungle IT. Why should I care and what difference it make to me? Can you just give us a bit of background on the accreditations and why it makes a difference in this bigger picture?
Yeah, so we're at Jungle, we are a Microsoft Solutions partner. that changed a few years ago from the old gold and silver competencies.
I think everybody was a gold partner.
At one point. That was 18 competencies that you could achieve across the board. They've now consolidated that down to 6. We hold 5 of the badges, which we're really proud of. That's actually a combination of over 100 exams. Most of them are technical. There are some foundation exams that people like Tom did actually pass, so well done, mate.
Thus proving that anyone can pass Microsoft exams,
But it's not just about the exams, it's about the client ads that we bring to each of the areas, around how we help clients deliver solutions as well. So it's a point system, effectively, that you get these badges. We are also a Microsoft Azure specialist, in Azure Virtual Desktop, which we have been talking about today. That's actually an external audit from Microsoft.
Okay.
So it's not just showing badges, it's showing that you can actually do the work. That audit is made up of 2 elements. The first part is being able to do cloud adoption work. So that's our methodology of building an Azure estate from the ground up, how we can provide repeatable, secure solutions for clients. And then the next part is how we deliver an Azure Virtual Desktop solution to a client. So from assessment, testing, to deployment, to ongoing management of those solutions. So we actually passed that about a year ago to get that badge. There's not many partners in the UK that have got that. Apart from being able to show off about the badge and all the work that we do, it actually does unlock funding for clients. So any kind of Azure Virtual Desktop work we do for clients, we can actually get professional services funding for that as well, which Nigel has been able to take advantage of.
And I guess that, Nigel, helps sell the story internally, doesn't it? Because obviously you care about the tech. I mean, you obviously care about the company not spending money they don't need to kind of thing. But I guess from a finance level in a firm, that is seen as a positive thing.
Absolutely. You know, I've been through similar projects before, and the professional services costs, they can start to rack up. So, yeah, that's been a huge aspect of being able to sell this into the firm.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, that's great. And so I guess just sort of finishing up, Nigel, and picking on you a little bit with some generalist quick fire questions.
Yes.
But in terms of, I guess, your role, how do you feel that the role of an IT leader, and this is in legal and non-legal, has changed over the last few years? Because I believe it has rapidly changed, but you're in the hot seat. How do you feel it's changed?
I mean, what I would say is it's become more and more a people role than a technology role over the last few years. The technology landscape, I mean, we've touched on it before, it's evolving that rapidly at the moment. And people have got concerns as well. You know, people see the emergence of AI and they're saying to themselves, well, what does it mean for my role? You know, how will what I do change? So what we've got to be able to do is we've got to be able to position technology in the right way. So what I do find is most of my time now is spent, you know, talking to people, bringing people along that journey, and making sure that when we are communicating what we're doing around technology, going back to what we said before, you know, we're providing the rationale for that, but we're also trying to explain what it means for our audience, what it means for our colleagues moving forward. So, yeah, definitely the people aspect has become a major part of what we do.
Yeah, and I think something I've found quite a lot is that a lot of the projects, so speaking from a jungle perspective, if we're looking at, I don't know, Microsoft Purview for data governance or Viva for employee engagement, we end up with 4 or 5 people coming into the workshops from a business. And yes, there's the IT person there, but then you've also got, you know, the data protection officer or the HR manager. I think a lot of these projects now, there's a technical element, but really we're needing to bring the wider business with us, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think people, you know, they always think, well, what does this mean for me? But I think because technology touches on every single area of the business, you need to make sure that people are involved at an early stage.
Yeah, so and do you see it just continuing to go more and more that way, with you sort of being just very much at the coalface with the board, with the users, and just keeping going on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, what we are starting to see now is we're starting to see our colleagues come to us talking about technologies they've seen or they're aware of, and, you know, asking us, well, I've heard about this tech. How do we get our hands on it? How do we use it? So, you know, years and years ago, it used to be that the technology department, the IT department, would be very much driving be the driving force for technology change. But I would say it's not always that way anymore. We're starting to see things start to swing the other way, which is great. But it also puts some pressures on the IT department. So yeah, we've got to balance, I guess, a number of aspirations and challenges. And, there is a level of complexity that sits behind it all that has to be managed as
complexity,
well.
governance, etc., etc. Yeah, I mean, you touched on a really good point there. We sort of did a bit of a meal the other day with some sort of IT leaders, and they and I said it was very humble of them to throw it open to their users and not try to be the font of all knowledge. And they'd sort of said around the AI piece, because it's common everywhere now, isn't it? They'd sort of said, look, if anyone has any suggestions for things of how they could use AI that would benefit them, bring them to us. We will kick the tires on it as an IT department, make sure it fits with where the business is going, governance, security. And they'd actually implemented something the other day, and the idea had come from the receptionist at the firm.
Yeah.
Because she is doing that role day in, day out. She knows better than the IT department
Absolutely.
her challenges, but they were humble enough to say, no, do come to us with suggestions. We will listen to them. We want to be engaged with you as users. And I thought that was really interesting as an approach.
Definitely. And I think it's important to, realise that if we can start to skill our colleagues up in, how all this AI stuff works and what it's about, then once we've done that, we are, I guess to a large extent relying on them to generate the ideas. They're out there, they're doing the work day to day. They know where the pain points are, so they can, start to identify where AI can be used and come to us with those thoughts.
Yeah, lovely. And in terms of and it's a very general question, but over the next couple of years, what's got you the most excited about what's on the IT horizon and what you might do with the firm? What's top of your radar in terms of things that are on your to-do list?
So I think really is that extension around the use of artificial intelligence. So, we have a number of initiatives underway at Switalskis at the moment to start to identify, I guess, not just that ad hoc use of AI, but how it can be applied more strategically. So I certainly see a continuation of that. Cybersecurity is the other massive area at the moment. But the thing we're starting now to see is cybersecurity and how it impacts AI, because there are emerging threats around that as well. So going back to what I was saying before, it's such a changing landscape at the moment, moving at breakneck speed. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with it all, but yeah, it's certainly exciting times.
Yeah, and I think, again, you and I have talked in the past around, I guess you have a lot to keep on top of in your role, and it's very hard as one, obviously you have your team, but as the leader, one man, knowing what I should do. And I know you've always believed in the strength of having a peer group, haven't you, that you can tap into, I guess, and share ideas with. Yeah,
that's right, Tom. I mean, I think I'd really struggle without that wider peer group and support network. So I think one of the things that's really important for any IT leader, is to get out to the conferences, establish peer networking groups where you can share ideas about, what's going on in your world. And what you tend to find is that you all are having the same challenges and everyone's approaching it a slightly different way, but just hearing other people's experiences and how they're going about things, it's absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, it's something I actively promote at Jungle, where I'll say, don't listen to Tom from Jungle telling you should be looking at something. Speak to one of our other clients that's been there and done it and learned from it and bits they could do better, etc., and just sharing that. And I guess to really put you on the spot for the final question, what one piece of golden advice would you give to sort of an IT leader, be it of a law firm or just generally an IT leader?
Yeah. So I would say that, well, a couple of things.
You're only allowed one, Nigel. No, we'll let you have two. You've come and done our podcast, so you can have two.
So I think the first thing is, going back to know your audience.
Yeah.
So I think we do work in sometimes a very technical and technically complex world, but, avoid the jargon. Just break things down, speak in commercial terms, speak in everyday language that people get, and when we're speaking to our team members in the IT team, we can talk technical, but yeah, keep it straightforward, keep it simple. But it is going back to that network as well, just having that strong support network in place as well.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fabulous. Well, thank you to both of you for joining us today. It's been an education. It always is speaking to you too, so I very much appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for joining us today for the Jungle Video Podcast. Hopefully there'll be more of these to come, so keep your eyes peeled.